Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today's video is going to be the Game Week 25 team selection. So I'll be looking at, of course, first of all, my Game Week 24 team, talking about the landscape of my picks in terms of the blanks, who I'm planning to go out of between something like Trippier and Shaw, what to do with some assets that I have in my team, and what my plans are in terms of embracing Liverpool. But Game Week 24, as we said, just starting it off, Trent had a fantastic week and he was the star of my week. A lot of people had some other stars, some people who went Rashford captain, some people who also potentially even have kept Fernandes in their teams or enjoyed Estupinian and his really fortunate sort of bench timing. I didn't have Estupinian, of course. I have deliberately sort of avoided Brighton for this period just to go through Game Week 25 and actually arrive at a very strong team in my opinion. So this is expectedly one of the weeks I'm hoping to have a huge rank rise, but we'll see how things stand. Trent, of course, the star there in a game where Newcastle had plenty of opportunities to score, and the reality is Trippier had most of those chances in terms of expected assists. He actually delivered 2 crosses from set piece corners where he could have easily got an assist, and it just shows the quality of Trippier as an asset. Yes, we've seen him blank as of late, but I think Bruno Guimaraes is coming back into the team, and you have to make a decision probably this week if you're going to something like Tarkowski to decide on whether you want to sell Trippier or sell Shaw. And for me, as someone who's quite tempted to go for a free hit 29, I think it makes sense to actually sell Shaw this week because he's going to be missing that fixture in blank Game Week 28, whereas Trippier will be playing versus Nottingham Forest. So this is an exquisite opportunity to, I would say, to keep Trippier. You have more value in him, hold up, and that's kind of my plan. If you are, let's say, free hitting on 28 and you're playing that sort of approach, I think it's a bit more of a balanced take here, but I think Trippier, once again, his numbers are fantastic. If you look at the expected assists per 90 across the league, just not even for defenders, but including midfielders and attackers, Trippier actually finds himself as 4th in the league, and Trent just behind him at 0.30. Trippier, of course, getting 0.32 per 90. And what that tells me is, of course, Liverpool and Newcastle are so far apart from each other from the defensive point of view, and with Bruno coming back and Liverpool not having any really, I would say, interesting sort of defensive additions, with maybe, let's say, Konate coming back being an interesting thing sometime in the distant future, but Trippier is going to be someone who I would see as a season keeper, so someone that I don't really want to touch for the time being, and I think Trippier definitely trumps Shaw in terms of maintaining for your team, despite Shaw actually keeping a clean sheet and actually having a good week. Gabriel, of course, a little bit dismaying, but he was very close to once again getting set piece returns, and it was quite interesting, of course, to see that Gabriel still is that sort of main target, but there are actually a lot of opportunities that Arsenal create now that aren't sort of direct free corners or direct free kicks, and that actually allows for a lot of opportunities to create for Zinchenko to actually shoot. He's been taking so many shots per game. I don't really think Zinchenko is a great clinical finisher, and of course he did finish in the previous game. He's much better, I think, when the ball's on the ground and less so in the air. But the reality is, if Arsenal continue to build so many corners and so many free kick tactics based around, let's say, getting a free shot from Zinchenko, then we'll have to sort of revise our opinion on Gabriel. For now, though, he still has really good expected numbers in terms of this kind of XG per 90 compared to some of his peers in Saliba and also Ben White. So I think it's interesting to actually hope that Gabriel finally gets a bullet header for our team. As far as the midfield, nothing to really say here. Of course, we lost out to the Rashford captainers, and I think this is really the end of KDB's duty. We know that he got an illness and was actually excluded from the Leipzig game, so he didn't fly there, but he might make the Bournemouth game. I just don't see the value when it's such a simple transfer to Salah this week. And then with Saka and Odegaard, these are the 2 players that I've prioritized because they're nailed and I don't really have to force a transfer in the future. So someone like Nketiah is nailed for the time being, but he will have to exit most people's team. So that's the decision I made 2 weeks back, where I went for Odegaard instead, and I'm quite happy I've gone there. But of course, Nketiah has missed a lot of great chances. Odegaard himself in the previous game, one actually assisted by Nketiah, hopefully, but he did miss that opportunity. So I think what's nice is Odegaard probably has a slightly lower ceiling for Game Week 25 compared to Nketiah, but you have to also think about how well he ticks along all the way towards potentially even the end of the season. So Odegaard is someone that I'm very happy to own. And then with the sort of forwards, yes, we had a Haaland blank, but I'd like to actually talk more about Nonto. Nonto is someone that I envision getting out of my team. I think Nonto is a lovely player, but he just simply will play a role here as someone who plays in Game Week 25, has an okay fixture for Southampton. I don't think Southampton actually have terrible defensive numbers. The reality is this year they've really struggled to score. So Nonto probably going to last must this game week for my team, and I'm not really interested in Leeds and any of the doubles that they have in the future. So Gnonto, someone who I would look to move out from in the near future if I have actually spare money and spare cash to do so. And that's going to be my team for Game Week 24. But if we head towards Game Week 25, what I've actually done is, just full disclosure, I've gone for a -4, and Tarkowski is someone who's going to be joining my team. Trent is someone that I'm very, very happy to keep, and Trent, of course, is someone that is very hard for a lot of people to access, because a lot of people who own Kane will not be able to go for Trent or Robertson this week. The reason why is because they will probably be adopting Salah into their teams. So Trent for me will continue to be a differential, and of course that huge loss to Real Madrid at home at Anfield is going to probably detract a lot of people away from Liverpool defense. But we have talked about Trent in recent weeks. The attacking numbers are there, and you can see it, for example, in the Newcastle game, where he had 2 great opportunities to actually assist Darwin twice, the exact same sort of cross from very, very far deep. That's the one difference I would say compared to Robertson, where I don't think Robertson has that sort of long game, whereas he's much more interesting sometimes in sort of attacking interplays and 1-2s in the final third. But Trent, of course, has that sort of X factor where he can just get across from nowhere. And he was also very close to getting assists in the Real Madrid game as well, very similar to the way that I explained that Trippier could have got an assist versus Liverpool when they were playing 10 versus 11. So that's one interesting thing, where if Trent, let's say, loses both clean sheets, you have at least that sort of security blanket of hopefully him getting 1 assist this week. As far as Tarkowski, it's not the best fixture window for Everton to get clean sheets, but the reality is at least you have hopefully this Aston Villa game to get a jammy clean sheet in. And yes, of course, they played City and Arsenal, and Aston Villa scored versus both teams. I would say with the City game, that was more of a drop-off of City, where you have the usual instance of a lot of 45-minute substitutions, and then the team probably drops their heads after having a 3-0 lead. This isn't the case with Everton. I think that they're pretty much a fortress at home since Dijk has come in. Terrible performance at Anfield, but you're hoping, of course, that Tarkowski doesn't do so well in the Arsenal game and hopefully gets something from the Aston Villa game. And as I explained in terms of team structure when I was talking about my chip strategy video on Game Week 29 and those double game week fixtures announced, Tarkowski is much better than a Wolves defender in terms of how they should be able to give you the security blanket of Game Week 28 and 32 no matter what happens in FA Cup fixtures. So that's the ideal ownership of Tarkowski there, holding you towards Game Week 33 and allowing you to probably be a little bit more diverse with chip strategy. As far as Gabriel, you've got Leicester and Everton here. Not exactly the best fixtures, I would say, because Leicester seemed like a team that can always score. Leicester were actually probably a little bit unfortunate to not score versus United last time out. And then with Everton, I think that's a great opportunity to get a clean sheet there, if we're being honest, but it might be even more interesting to actually own triple Arsenal attack this week. So if I was free hitting this week, I'd definitely probably go towards someone like a Saka, Odegaard, and Kedia triple up. But then for a regular team that I have, I think I'm quite happy to own Gabriel this week. So let's actually quickly head on to the midfielders. And I'm going to be bring Andreas from what is usually the bench into the team. He gets to play versus Wolves, whereas I've got Saka and Odegaard and Salah. This is probably the key point of discussion here, where I'm going to say that I will be leaving the captaincy discussion for a little bit later in the video, so do look out for the timestamp for that. I think there's a great discussion here to be had between Saka and Salah. It's not as simple and clear cut as Salah's the best option to pick. I think a lot of people will see Salah as the best option to pick, but I think Arsenal have looked very consistent, at least from the attacking point of view lately, even though people are seeing that Arsenal have dropped off from, let's say, the kind of highs experienced recently. So what I would say is Saka actually has really good numbers, and his numbers have ticked along much better than Salah's has in the recent 5 games. But as I said, I'll save that discussion later on for the captaincy. I just think it's very close this week and not very clear cut for Salah. As far as Odegaard, very happy to own him this week. Not much to say about this team. Salah is going to have a very tough fixture in terms of Game Week 29, and I think he might be the only one who actually remains in my team in terms of Liverpool assets by that game week fixture window, because I'll be free hitting, of course, in Game Week 29, but I think I'll also be moving out of Trent and Darwin in the short-term future, just because there are Brighton assets and Brentford assets to adopt quite early on after Game Week 25. And of course, with the forwards, just to round things out, I will be completing the -4 in the hit with the 2 free transfers and that hit by going for Darwin this week out of Mitrovic. And Mitrovic is someone that I was quite happy to move out of. I did actually capture the price rise or the price fall on Mitrovic, but I will be looking to go for Darwin regardless. I think even though Mitrovic might not be confirmed to be out, he probably will actually play versus Wolves. I like the upside of going for Darwin, and I think I'm still quite flexible with chip strategy. Worst case scenario, I can just free hit 28, but I'm still tempted to actually go towards free at 29 by actually prioritizing transfers away from my Liverpool assets into Brentford and Brighton assets. And I think that's wholly possible, right? You can go for Darwin to Tony, you can go for Trent to Estupinian as examples there. So I think that's all in the cards. And then with Nonto, he might be a transfer out in the future for, if I, let's say, have a little bit more money to someone like a Watkins in the future, if I have a lot more money able to be stored by going out of Darwin, for example, and out of Trent, which I think is a reality because I'm not a Kane owner. So there's a lot of money to be spread in this team. And these Brighton midfielders aren't exactly very expensive. So Nonto is going to be a placeholder for another interesting forward if we have the opportunity to do so, let's say beyond Game Week 29. And as we look to kind of create a solid team towards wildcard 33. As far as captaincy this week, though, I've decided to actually go for a captaincy of Saka over Salah. And I think this is why we have to talk about the numbers here between Saka and Salah, and also just simply my eye test. If we go first with the eye test, I think Saka has been actually shooting a lot of shots per game. You can actually see it in terms of just simply shots on target stats and then also general shooting stats. Salah, of course, has been very consistent year in, year out, but I think we could also say that Darwin has taken a lot more shots from this Liverpool system. Salah, of course, scored an absolute tap-in versus Real Madrid, but the reality is a lot more shots are now being created for Darwin on a game-to-game basis. And you have Gakpo as well, who I think is a very unselfish player. The way he actually looked towards assisting Salah, for example, in that Newcastle game when he had a great opportunity to shoot himself, is a good example of that. But I think Gakpo will not look to be as selfish or unselfish this week. And also with Salah, as I said, I think there is a genuine concern here where people are probably underestimating the strength of Arsenal, despite them dropping points as of late themselves. And whilst Liverpool's attack looks very strong, a lot of those numbers will be shared with Darwin. With Saka, as I said, if you look at and compare to someone like Odegaard, who takes 1 to 2 shots per game, Saka is now taking something like 5 to 7 shots per game. And so he's taken a much more advanced and prominent role, even looking towards breaking towards the middle of the box, which is what he did to actually score his previous goal in the Aston Villa game. I also like, once again, the fact that they're both penalty takers, so that sort of makes it a true 50-50 there. You have more players in this Arsenal team who can actually draw a penalty in the box in between, let's say, Odegaard, Martinelli, and Saka themselves. So that's quite interesting for me this week if we're just making that sort of eye test discussion. But if we just head towards the numbers now, the reality is Saka has actually had higher XG and XA in the last 5 games. And I think the last 5 games sample size is quite good because this is the sort of run where a lot of people have felt like, okay, this has been an uptick in Liverpool form and also a downtick in Arsenal's form. But what it really shows is that Saka still independently looks very good as an attacking asset. And of course, clean sheet points I don't think are really going to make a huge difference here. So you're looking at simply the raw stats. Saka has had 3 goals. Salah himself 1, and when we look at, let's say, the opponents, I actually think it's very close. And in fact, probably Leicester is a team where you could look to exploit most outside of, let's say, these 4 teams between Everton, Crystal Palace, and Wolves. Because if you actually look at the last 5 games, Leicester seems to be the worst team, both on the underlying numbers and also simply in terms of goals conceded. Everton, Crystal Palace, and Wolves have all been quite consistent in terms of conceding 5 to 6 goals, whereas Leicester, of course, the alarming amount of 10. Now, one of that is the great game that Man United have last time out, influencing a lot of Leicester's numbers. Man United probably had an XG of something like 4.5, 4.3 in that game, which is, of course, an astronomically high amount. But we know that Arsenal can play towards that quality. And I think one thing that makes Leicester interesting is that they do still find it within their game to go very offensive, whereas a team like Everton and Crystal Palace probably have a much more defensive setup, even Wolves, for example. So that's the one sort of ace in the hole there, where I think the Leicester game could be quite interesting if we think about where there's going to be a huge difference-making potential for a Saka or a Salah. And that's sort of how I see things, really. I think it's very close between them in terms of all the raw stats. Now, over the course of the season, Salah is someone who's actually had better XG per 90 numbers, better XA per 90 numbers as well. But as I said, with the recency bias and looking towards Saka and his increasingly more offensive role now that Jesus is out of the team and Jesus takes much less of the ball and Saka is now asked to deliver more, I would say, in terms of shot making and shot creation, I think Saka seems to be the best captaincy option this week. And it's very close for me, but I'd lean towards Saka for now. And that's going to be my team selection this week. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day.